All right, let's try this again. Hello, tell your friends, tell everybody what's going on. All right, because I had to restart because I think that there was some interweb issues. So I'm going to be going live today with, hold up, I want to make sure I get her last name right. Jewleesah Contreras. Yes, we're going to be talking about the moment, expanding on the moment, expanding on healing in this moment. All right, so she's a Dominicana from the Bronx, creator of YouTube hit Shit Spanish Girls Say, yes, and creator of Ladies Who Bronche podcast. She's a writer, poet, actor, and founding member of the Middle Voice Theater Company. She's going to give us her perspective and some wisdom in this moment, through this moment. I'm going to see, let's see if she's on right now. Hold up. We're going to try to reconnect. Here we go.
Is this working?
There we go.
There we go.
Much better, I think.
But yeah, okay, great. But yeah, what we were saying before, the thing started acting up was like, there's a lot of learning that we are doing right now. And I think that for me, a lot of things have come up. First of all, it's like you said earlier, welcome to the revolution, right? Like, I think that
welcome to the revolution, people.
In our lifetime, we've seen a lot of moments where folks get excited and we're like, all right, is this the time we're really going to transform things and band together? And, I think that the power of our collective voice right now, for me, feels a lot louder than I've ever experienced. And so it's really like, I, even myself as a social justice warrior, am like preparing myself to be like, all right, guys, this is not a fire drill this time. This time it's actually,
this is the drill.
We have the momentum to really make something happen here, and understanding that means a lot of things. It means a re-education to make sure that, I am representing both my group, as y'all can see back here, Yo soy Dominicana, right? And so like understanding like that there's a learning and an undoing that has to happen in my community, and holding ourselves accountable to that. And then at the same time, understanding that there is a unified force that is oppressing not just my group, but all groups across the board, and understanding, so what does that collective voice look like, and how do we stand in unison in those spaces? So it's a lot of learning and making sure we're coming correct. And sometimes we're very well intentioned and stuff, but everybody has a little bit to learn. And for me, like, the more you're open to loving yourself and self-growth, the more that when that learning moment pops up, it might catch you by surprise. You know what I mean? There are often times you're like, oh shit, I didn't realize I was problematic. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't know.
I mean, I recently just, like we were talking about yesterday, this whole, the difference between abolition and reform.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And even just the inherent, like, kind of white supremacy that I kind of had in my mind, even just thinking that reform could be possible, no matter who was promoting it. You know what I mean? And it's not possible, is what I'm learning. And the more that I inundate myself in works of, abolitionists since the beginning of time, especially Black women, like, I just really am just, wow, okay, yeah, no, there's no such thing as reform for a system based off of white supremacy. There cannot be reform in that regard. So I've been very much schooled on that in the past, like 24 hours, even 48 hours, because I've always believed in abolition, of course, but I had this thing in my mind where it was like something that can come later on down the line, when it's like, we've been constantly in that conversation of, oh, well, later we'll get there, maybe. But it's like, no, now is the time to radically shift our mindset into like, no, what is possible? What is the world that we can imagine? And how can we grow to that world? Versus like, what are the different ways we can band-aid the situation on the way there?
And I think that that's one thing that I think we have to identify the power that we're standing in right now, which is, you know, back in the day, there were a lot more limits to the movement. And that's not to say that we've made it to where, let's say, Dr. King or any name, any revolutionary, like, it's not that we've already accomplished it, but there's a difference, right? Like even the power of recording on a cell phone, for example, right? And capturing stories. So like, I think we really have to keep our boots to the ground and understand that like, we might not have everything at our disposal to snap our fingers and just make it happen, but certainly we have more tools than the people who came before us, and we have the wisdom of what they learned, right? And I think that that's where the value is in learning our history. So for example, like when people are talking a lot about the Black Panthers right now, there are still people in our own community who think that they were a violent group, for example.
Well, I mean, they were put on the terrorist watch list. So if you were a part
Exactly.
of like brainwashed America that was only ever getting your information and news, especially during that time specifically from that one source, from like a news channel, you know,
Yeah.
the media, whether liberal or, you know, conservative, whatever way you go with it, it's run by the same people. And they have a narrative, a very clear, succinct narrative that they are pushing no matter what, no matter where you get your information from. So I think that's another thing about how amazing this moment is and different this moment is that we're keeping each other educated. We're sharing tools with one another. We're holding each other accountable in a public light, which happens to be online, which doesn't need to be a physical holding of accountability, which is quite interesting, I think.
Right, right. And just like the floods of information that's out there, like it's like that. And again, welcome to the revolution. The shit that we, excuse my language, I don't know if I can curse.
No,
but the
please.
things
Girl, my fans, no. There's no such thing
but
as
you know,
filter here.
the way shit is going to hit the fan, and like when something impacts a fan, things splatter, right? The corners that we are going to have to explore and dismantle are going to be crazy. It's going to be a mess. It's going to be a splatter, but that is the point, is that you rebuild. And like, yeah, rebuilding means there's cracks, right? And you will inevitably see those flaws, but you have to fill that in with the gold and decorate those scars and say, this is what we learned, right? We have to amplify that so we understand, so generations after us, right, can then level up as we have and have more tools, because we have to be honest about our history, both internally and with the forces who are against us, right? Like,
that is the most important thing.
Yeah.
Like really looking at our history. I think that's where the dissonance comes from, and why we're even arguing whether or not, you know, the Black Lives Matter movement is a valid cause for everyone to get behind or not. I think it's the fact that that's a debate is thoroughly ingrained from our inability to look at the truth of our history. Yep. We were not taught the truth of our history. We were not taught the truth of or the depth of the pain and the shame that comes with what has been done to Black people in America. You know what I mean? And it's like, and we've been talking about it, even the nuance of that, of Latinos and or the Latinx community, because, you know, we want to separate ourselves from it, but in that separation, there's even a sort of supremacy, because there are Afro Latinos like yourself.
Yeah.
Like that is an intersection that is very much alive and real in the United States of America, in this melting pot of cultures that come from all over the world and present in all kinds of colors. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So there's like an intersectional battle in that overall battle for Black lives. You know what I mean? Because there are Black lives in all kinds of cultures besides just the descendants of the people who were brought here specifically as from chattel slavery, and specifically for the use of specifically as property. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So there's like that's an even another little layer of the nuance to where we have to really dig in and heal and talk about the truth of all of the layers of the history, and how colonialism is like ingrained in our very practices.
Absolutely. And I think it's so important for us to think about what we were taught and think about the language that was used and how things were framed. So when we were learning about how, you know, we had colonizers coming to Latin America, the Caribbean, all these places, like it was framed in a way that was adventurous and necessary for the beautiful growth of what would come to be the United States of America. But it wasn't taught from the perspective of like, hey, we existed in these spaces and we were doing our thing. And then here comes these here come these groups and oppress us, right? But the word oppression was not taught in that, like in the history lesson. When we were preparing for a test in history, we were not using those words.
Oh, manifest destiny.
Right, manifest
like,
destiny.
What destiny are you manifesting by taking land from people, bro?
Exactly.
Like,
exactly. And so then details get lost in that history, like, you know, depending on which academic you're asking, anywhere between 94 to 96% of African slaves from the slave trade were left in Latin America and the Caribbean. 94 to 96%. That means there's only 4 to 6% of that lineage that came here to the United States of America, right? And that is the African American race, right? And so, you know, when we understand these numbers, then that has to shake you in a way. So then it's like, so then where did all those people go? Where did they disperse? They didn't just stay in Dominican Republic, Cuba, Puerto Rico, by the way. You know what I mean? They went to other spots. That's Jamaica. This is, you know, all of these Caribbean islands. There's Black people in Mexico. You know what I mean? Like there's just such a spread, and it is just not the aspect with which we were taught. But understanding that is important.
Yeah.
The more you understand that they didn't teach you that because they didn't want you to have that information, the more you start to question the way in which other things have been communicated and taught to you.
100%. We also, you know, in this conversation of broader, to even include another layer of it, is the indigenous populations and how they were also enslaved, and they were also kind of put into this whole melting pot of this diaspora. You know, we are a mix of all that is, or that was, colonialism. You know what I mean? It was these European settlers coming in and bringing in human beings and exterminating human beings from a land that already existed and that had already had their cultures. So even when, you know, because I'm Cubana Americana, and my grandparents, both sides, my mom was born there, and I have, you know, all of that in me. You know, my ancestors are una mezcla of all of the above, like all of ours. You know, we're a diaspora of all of these things. And when we talk about, you know, these rights and these liberations, we're talking about the liberation of our own people. And I think that there's this divide when it comes to the racism that exists in the Latinx communities. Because there's also different layers of it and different levels of it. Because you know, in Cuba and in the Dominican Republic, you still have two different cultures, even if we are similar. You know what I mean? And then when you go to South America or Central America, you have a whole nother range of how indigenous communities and slave communities like all kind of mixed together and made their own valid cultures out of that. And we all profit off of those cultures that were created by the hands of slaves and indigenous. You know what I mean? We are the amalgamation of all of those things come to light, you know, especially white Latinos who love to claim this rich culture, you know.
Hello.
That rich culture comes from our roots. That comes from the history of the African influence over our cultures.
Yes, absolutely. And that's one of my favorite things, is to see how people really deny the black culture in the Latinx community. And I'm like, but same plátano, different recipes, motherfuckers, because the plátano stretches very wide and it leaves the Spanish tongue, okay, right? El mismo plátano que nosotros nos gustamos acá, también los africanos cocinan ese plátano y lo comen, y nosotros lo aprendemos de eso. I'm saying it in Spanish because some folks are writing, say it in Spanish. Nosotros estamos hablando para lo que están...
Gente aquí que habla español. Escuchando.
Oye, para lo que nosotros estamos hablando es que nosotros como una comunidad no tenemos la educación, y no porque no queremos, pero no nos dieron la educación para saber de dónde viene la familia de nosotros. Mira, mi español es roto, como dicen de los dominicanos. Yo hablo mi español roto, pero ¿por qué es eso? Hasta eso tiene una historia, ¿verdad?
Hasta eso tiene una historia.
Todo eso es importante. Entonces estamos hablando que es importante de entender la historia negra entre los latinos, porque no es nada más la historia, vamos a suponer, en la República Dominicana, que lo haitiano, que no lo queremos aquí, que sé yo cuánto. Óyeme, nosotros en esa isla querían hacer una isla negra poderosa, porque nosotros somos una raza negra. Después, cuando entró Trujillo, que ustedes saben que ya eso fue más de 30 años de qué, enseñándote algo que no era para tu bien, pero sino para mantener una raza negra baja, porque están siguiéndole los pasos, así como los Estados Unidos, y si ellos están viendo que en los Estados Unidos les funciona muy bien, que los negros lo tienen bajo y los americanos, tú sabes, muy arriba, entonces, ¿qué hacen?
Los blancos, porque
Los
también
blancos.
americano, ¿qué quiere decir? Porque hablamos de africano-americano como si los africanos americanos serían parte separada de la cultura americana. O sea, pero si los africanos americanos son los que han hecho y han creído, o han creado, my bad.
Creado, sí.
Han creado la cultura americana. O sea, todo el mundo como que quiere ser africano, quieren ser eso. Ok, so es importante hablar de eso entre nuestras comunidades porque hay mucho racismo.
Yes.
Y también de lo que está hablando Jewleesah ahora es eso, esta mentalidad de que somos separados, que la historia de los africanos-americanos es diferente de la historia de los africanos cubanos o dominicanos o latinos en general. O sea, como si esa historia es algo aparte o como si ellos no son parte de esa historia. Aunque los africanos-americanos, los negros que están aquí en América, ellos vinieron porque como propiedad, lo querían
sí,
acá.
no fue voluntario, ellos no sacaron visa para llegar aquí, eso fue a la mala.
Exacto. Y también en eso, los latinos, nosotros cuando veníamos para acá, fue por decisión. Fue porque queríamos crear una vida nueva para nuestra familia, para nuestra familiar, para nuestra generación o para los niños. Eso porque vinimos nosotros desde donde sea, en Sudamérica, en América Central, española, lo que sea. Todos veníamos a los Estados Unidos por decisión, no necesariamente porque nos trajeron acá. Eso es otro nivel de problema que tenemos que hablar, porque por esa razón, ellos no se creen que nos deben algo. No hay ningún que yo te debo algo en esa relación, porque para ellos, tú tomaste la decisión de venir acá, así que si te jodes, te jodes, eso fue tu decisión. Right. Así que los derechos de los afro-latinos ni se habla de eso, ni se habla de que cuando estamos hablando de estos statistics, que también tiene que ver con los afro-latinos y también los latinos en general. Porque si te creen diferente de ellos, o sea, es el sistema que existe.
Sí, and I just to come back in for the folks who
right back to the English.
Like I think definitely what we're saying is that there is a way in which even the way in which we came here, Dominicans, we come here and we get our visas to come to this country, but we're talking about a history of people who were enslaved and did not have a choice, right? And so like that basic understanding already changes the dynamics of their American experience when they get here, right? So you're talking about a group, and this comes, I'll frame this by saying, like, there's a way in which when we're having these tough conversations with each other, we have to be gentle because, like, does it piss me off every time Dominicans who are Black deny their Blackness? Absolutely. Like, it makes me violent almost. I almost want to shake them and remind them, of their history. But then I have to remember what? I have to remember that if it's somebody like a cousin who lives on the island, the access to information, the books that they're being taught in school, not the same as mine. Let's keep in mind that they were under dictatorship until the early 60s, which means people like my mother, were still alive when a lot of this teaching was happening. And then years after that, the person who took power after Trujillo, Joaquin Balaguer, was a man who was his right-hand man. And so what happened was we changed the system, and it wasn't a dictatorship, but it was basically like putting a Trump in office after taking out a dictator from the United States, for example. And so what happens in the rhetoric, in the same way we're experiencing in America right now, that rhetoric was what folks were taught. And really it was quite dangerous to think anything else and to speak out. I mean, they were literally killing Black people and tracking Black people down. And so it was very difficult to be openly woke, right? And for a lot of folk where the priority was, well, I need to find food, or it can my kids go to school. I mean, we're talking about a third world country. It becomes difficult to make your identity, in any case, black or light skin or whatever, it makes it difficult to make your identity the priority. So then what happens in a moment when everybody is like, this is who you are, remember who you are, blah, blah, blah. People are like, what are you even talking about? I've spent my life just trying to survive. What are you
spent my life
talking
trying to
about?
distance myself from the part of me that makes me a target.
Yes, yes. And so it's like, that's a survival tactic.
When people don't claim their Afrocentricness or their Afro-ness, you know, it's not because they don't recognize that it's true, because there are plenty of things that we are told in microaggressive form, in passive aggressive form,
yes,
in very direct form as a society. Okay, as a Latino community, there are many passive aggressive things, or just even simple like trying to marry lighter, or trying to have lighter kids, or trying to, you know, clean the race and all that kind of bullshit.
And
you know,
being
like
told,
grandparents.
I've heard people say, gosh, I have a list of these. I mean, like, I've heard people say things like, oh, bueno, si tú te vas a estar cortando con negro, aprende a hacer trenza, porque esos cabellos no son fácil. Meaning, like, oh, if you're going to be fucking a black guy, you better get ready and learn how to do braids, because that hair ain't easy, right? And like, it's almost like a threat. It's almost like the blackness that you're associating with.
You better not bring that into your situation.
Yes. It is threatening your situation, right? It is threatening your ability to move through the world without being oppressed in a particular way, which is, again, why I'm saying it is important to be gentle, because what you are combating is somebody's survival tactic more so than a belief system. It's just if I'm not going to see change in my lifetime, how do I shut down and protect myself? Because I don't believe we're ever going to have the revolution. So leave me the fuck out of it. Don't talk to me about blackness. Don't talk to me about any of this. And so it is a survival tactic. So we have to understand that it's almost like you're educating people, and you're also saving people from this toxicity that one develops, and it is completely natural, and we've all done it. You know,
1000%.
I learned I was black at 19. I didn't know I was black. Like, I knew I was black, but because black people were like, oh no, you Spanish, right? And I was like, oh, you Spanish, which is actually where my the title for my video came from. Should Spanish girls say, I know the proper term is not Spanish. I am not from Spain. You know what I mean? I know that, but why did we do that? Because the colloquialism of New York City made it such that people were blanketed, and if you spoke Spanish, you were Spanish. But then I'd go into my Spanish corners, y las mexicanas weren't really fucking with me. You know what I mean? And like guatemaltecas weren't really fucking with me. And it was like hard. It was it became difficult because they also, in their own circle, were like, well, we don't really see black people.
Una separación.
So they started, so I'm being a ping pong ball between the black community and the Latinx community, and understanding, like, damn, but we eat the same plátano. Like, I always go back to that, and it's such a simple thing, but I'd always be like, it is so confusing to me how we're so different. And then I learned. And then it was such a relief. And that's why it's important to have these conversations, because people are relieved of pain when you talk about the difficult things. It's a difficult conversation, but that's part of the healing process. And healing hurts. Healing hurts. But you always
looking at yourself and looking at all of the spaces where you are imperfect.
Yep.
You know, and unfortunately, that's one of the biggest parts of all of this, especially again for the Latinx community, is that we need to look at ourselves before we can, you know, come around claiming this high and mighty energy, especially white Latinos, which I've noticed, like, a lot of people are pretty silent for the most part, white Latinos, like very silent, actually, as if our brothers and sisters aren't trapped in cages because of ICE, as if our parents, my parents, you know, when my grandparents first came to Miami, there were signs that literally said, no fucking Cubans, no Cubans here, no Cubans allowed, no Cubans welcome, right along with no Jews. You know what I mean? Like the Cuban people were refugees of a dictatorship. You know what I mean? Like, at the end of the day, like, that's what we came over as. So for me to listen to any white Cubans talk about anything besides being on the side of Black Lives Matter, it's just absurd to me. And all of the different, you know, things that I've noticed, all of this trauma points right back to this need to be a model citizen, because again, we weren't brought here. We came here by choice. So there is an underlying guilt in that, where we have to be good Americans and we better show up and show out and be Americans. And America is so synonymous with racist, okay, that oftentimes, even when we're betraying our own communities, we are prepared to take up arms for our oppressors. Because it's not like my grandparents or my parents, even though we're white passing, had all the opportunity in the world. You know what I mean?
Right.
Había una tía aquí that claimed my grandparents. So, you know, she helped them out a little bit when they got here, but they had to start from scratch. You know, they worked as maintenance people and insurance sellers and teachers. You know, we're out here part of the middle class, the working class, you know. And granted, there's still so much privilege in that I've had to recognize and be very mindful of in my whole process of growing since I was 16. Is that I look like a white person walking around the world, and I'm going to get treated like a white person, whether my prima is darker than me or not. You know what I mean? Like that's my experience in the world. But it's just as important for me to talk about these issues because of the Afro Latinos that exist in the world, who are the backbone of our cultures, are the creators of our cultures, the hand makers of our cultures, you know, the fabric of the music, the fabric of the food, and the hospitable nature and the warmth, you know, that all comes from our Afro Latinx family, you know.
Bad
So
Bunny
it's just so
can
important
run.
that when we're talking about this Black Lives Matter movement, we are talking about those lives. Those lives are part of that conversation.
Yes.
And they might not be the center focus of the conversation because, of course, Black American experience of those who were brought here has been a very particular experience in history of disgusting violence, you know, like just systemic violence that we have to just really reckon with right now in a way that I don't think we've ever even been given the capacity to, because we got no jobs, everyone's home, everyone's fucking freaking out because of a health crisis, and we're really we're looking at all of the different ways already, even before this started this came to light again, you know, is that we were all already in a state of like, what the fuck is going on? What is government for? What is our tax dollars for if we cannot provide personal protection equipment for our frontline workers that were frontline workers a second ago but are getting arrested now as protesters? Like
right. And I always call that like people, I feel like people enter these movements at different points because people stay unwoke until they hit their trigger limit, right?
Or until something happens to them.
Right, exactly, which is just that. It is either too close and it's like close enough that it's a problem, or it fully happens to me and you're then thrown into it, right? Todo el mundo se despierta en diferentes puntos. A veces coge que algo te pase a ti para que tú entiendas lo que están sintiendo la otra gente. And it's really... It's scary because then that's what makes it difficult for us to unify, is that different people are on different pages at all times. And I think that you're absolutely right. Having coronavirus put people in a state of reflection, right? Because while it absolutely did disproportionately affect communities of color, as most things do, and we had to see that, we also had to see communities that usually hold a lot of privilege have to really maneuver things around to be able to have that privilege in a time where the universe was like, this is bigger than your money and what you can usually use as a resource. So now we have folks who are itching with that, and we're still in the virus, actually. Like, we're in these streets again, but the virus is still here. And so now what we're starting to see is people feeling the pressure of the anger and saying, holy shit, well, if I don't change something, I'm getting canceled, or there's going to be a shift. Like, people are feeling the pressure of that shift because we're angrier, we're hungrier for the change, because we've just been sitting in our house for months in a very unacceptable and insufficient situation.
It's also all really connected. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, like, when we talk about why coronavirus would disproportionately affect Black and brown communities, we never talk about why.
Yeah.
We get all these fucking stats thrown at our faces, and it's just like, oh, look, Black people it seems like they're getting sicker. It's like, can we talk about why? Because they're more likely to be part of the working class. They're more likely to be one of those people who's out there being an essential worker. They're more likely to first of all, live in a situation of poverty. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like disproportionately because of the history of this country
Right.
and our constant oppression of these communities and excessive policing of these communities. And every time they have historically thrived, literally people come in and bomb them or kill them or figure out a way to dismantle their socioeconomic standing that they have built for themselves. So every time that you see people come up, then you see them down. And I just saw a comment from some ignorant person talking about how if this whole country was racist, that there wouldn't be any famous Black people. Like, there's a continuous conversation. We really love to talk when we have these conversations about race. We really love to bring up, you know, these kind of token people who have been able to overcome their circumstance, right? Which is granted, like you can come across any race and you can do that, right? You can always find somebody who has overcome their circumstance.
Right.
But if we continue to make the story of one, the proposed story of a whole, when there are very obvious obstacles that are legal and most times, okay, that are the impediment of someone becoming successful, X, Y, Z, whatever way they become successful, okay? If you're not addressing those issues, like you're not looking at the larger picture.
Yep.
And that's the real problem, is that we're really not looking at the larger picture. We really want to focus in on, yeah, pero I don't like the looting and the rioting. I don't agree with the violence. It's like, how can you not agree with the violence and stand in support of systemic violence?
Right.
So it's not just violence, it is systemic violence. It's violence perpetrated by people who are sworn to protect or whose supposed job is to protect. What are they protecting? If we cannot, as a collective, critically assess these kinds of institutions to when we have situations where they are very obviously murdering civilians. Let's take race out of it, right? Because people like to be like, what about black on black crime? And, you know, more police kill white people. Why are we justifying death with more death?
Right. And
what I think is that, like, it's bad. It's bad all the way around. It's fucking bad.
It's bad. And then I go back to like the having to be gentle, because in that community, and I only bring it up because I think it's important to highlight, because we are the labels we wear and the titles the world give us, and then we are who we are. And in the police force and several armed forces, we have to consider our men and women of color that are in that space. And we have to really understand and unpack what it is that the experience is in that space that drives them to be in a position where when they're facing someone in their community who is struggling for both of them, that they feel comfortable shoving a baton in their face. What brought them to that point, right? That is a very, very important thing. And so like for me, like, listen, growing up here in the South Bronx, the trial and tribulation would be one as such that, you know, we grow up in the South Bronx. It's hard out here. It's real hard in these streets. So what happens? I want to be an upstanding citizen. I want to get out of these circumstances. I want to help people also because I see the struggle. I see a pathway to a career like police officers. And maybe I liked playing cops and robbers as a kid. Maybe there's something about just that line of work that calls to me, and it's coming from a very good place. Great. You know, I get into the system then takes their people and makes them unlearn certain things and then injects new information. It tells them these are the people we target. Yeah, it brainwashes them. This is the people we need to target. This is why this is important. This is why you can get away with this low key. Like, you know what I mean? Like all the things that we know that are the problems, but then they're taught that, and then they're told, and this is what you protect and serve. And then they're taught that in a way that we don't actually get taught that. So we don't even understand the depth of the brainwashing, you know what I mean? And so then they're in these systems, and for those who don't go to the sunken place, but are in the space, they say, fuck, well, this is terrible, but if I leave, who's going to change the system? So you have some who stay, and they're really trying to move up rather than move out because they're trying to do something. But then you have those who see the circumstances, are overwhelmed by the work ahead and say, well, I got to take care of my family, and that's why I got into this shit in the first place. So peace out movement. I'm not going to move out. I am also going to try to move up, but it is now about me and my personal needs, and it is not considering the experiences of others. So I'm comfortable being out here and beating the shit out of people in the name of cops, because they're just out here making our jobs difficult, and that's all I care about in the end of the day. And understanding that, because we got to unpack that, we got to come for those people, we got to shake them up a bit and be like, yo, brother, you know what changes? Maybe if we win this movement, you get more mental health support, and you don't need to be stigmatized for trying to take advantage of it. Or, hey, y'all are severely underpaid. Talk about Black celebrities. Y'all are on the front lines every day, and who's advocating for you to get paid for that level of commitment, right? And like understanding that this is the same fight, and that if they do put their batons down, that perhaps we can move something together. Because imagine a world where all the police said, nah, what they're gonna do, arrest all the police and all the people? What are they gonna do? What are they going to do? It forces a change.
That was my whole entire thing. Is like, when we're talking about this all cops are bad cops situation, right? I think that there's a lot of sensitivity around this, because I know that there's a lot of minorities out there who have family members, who have brothers, sisters, aunts, cousins that are in the force, or either in the military or they're in the police force. And we want to, I think that's another thing that needs to be addressed, because like, even just talking to my dad, when he reflects on who it was growing up, right, in his high school that ended up becoming a cop, it was usually the people who were not on a path to do anything else with their lives.
Yeah.
Or they were engaging in a lot of criminal activity when they were younger, right? So you have this whole, and that's not to say that that's only minorities. That's a lot of the white men who go into these things. They go into these institutions knowing what they can get away with in those institutions, knowing that they're going to be protected by police unions if they commit hate crimes, knowing that they can exercise their egos to whatever degree they want, because they are above the law. They are considered above the law. And that's interesting to me too, is that dynamic of the people who are supposed to be upholding the law are somehow above the law. I feel like that is the biggest contradiction you could possibly be giving your people. Like, that is the biggest oxymoron that could ever be in existence, is a supposed institute that is going to be protecting people that is allowed to murder, abuse, sexually assault, maim, do whatever they see fit, okay, for whatever circumstance, and they can literally justify it on the back end in their paperwork. And all DAs and all judges and all, because right now, I mean, this is very clearly like a sickness, and the sickness is not new. This is not new in any way, shape, or form. Like, this entire establishment came to be based off of slave patrols. And maintaining this, you know, whole law and order, you know, ideology that is somehow implying and constantly implying that human beings by nature are rowdy, chaos driven, and unable to govern themselves, right? And unable to hold themselves accountable, unable to hold their neighbors accountable, you know? And we never ever address the underlying reasons as to why someone would be incapable of that. You know, when you take resources away from communities, when you do not invest in schools, when you have juvenile detentions where you're supposed to be teaching children consequence by locking them in cages, when you have legally funded detention centers that are concentration camps, when you have all of these things, when you're not investing in small businesses, and you're not investing in the well-being of a community at large, and you're constantly actually doing the opposite and divesting from them and infesting you know, trouble, like even just the criminalization of drugs. Like, imagine if we did not criminalize drugs, and we treated drug addiction as a public health issue, as it should be, because drug addiction is a response, very obviously, to lack of resource. To the feeling of inadequacy, to feeling of unworthiness in a society where we literally make people's worth based off of their productivity. And if you do not give somebody opportunity, they cannot possibly give you back productivity. If you don't have an input, you can't have an output. And we all know that because of all the technology we be using on a regular basis. So if you don't have an input of resource and investment, you cannot possibly have an output of a law-abiding citizen. You know what I mean? People are gonna fucking survive, whether you like it or not. They're gonna figure out a way to survive, and that is the core issue. And that's why when we're talking about defunding the police and we talk about care not cops, We're talking about reinvesting these hundreds of millions and billions of
Yes.
dollars of our taxpayer money, okay, including these communities, because every single person in these communities of color or Black communities, they are tax-paying citizens, just like us. They work their jobs and they pay their motherfucking taxes. So guess what? They deserve their rights to that money. They deserve to have their communities invested in. And we all deserve to, first of all, I think first and foremost, the baseline here is the lack of education, the lack of access to the truth, the real truth, not the white supremacist written history version of the truth.
Yep. Everything you said and more. And I just like, I think that learning all of that is just the beginning of the work. And that is important to note, right? That if people begin to grow weary because they're like, oh man, this is so overwhelming, we're never going to get anywhere. Wait a minute, because the ride it hasn't even started yet. This is just, you know what I mean?
We're just checking to make sure our seatbelts are on.
Right, like they're still doing
you got your
seat
seatbelt
check.
on, bitch? You got that bar down?
Right, like,
That's
you know, they coming down, like, you know, you got to make sure, because it is what is ahead is really something that's going, we are literally pivoting an entire hegemonic mindset. I mean, we are literally changing the minds of millions of people, and we're trying to do it all at once, and that is a very heavy task. So, your camera.
No way. Is it paused again?
Yeah. Yeah,
Do you have some crazy ass face?
It's not a crazy face, but you look real serious, like you really seriously.
Like I'm really got a point.
Me.
I got a point to make.
Right, like you're listening. You're definitely taking in my words in it's understanding that the work comes ahead. And
how we doing? Am I back?
No,
I'm still not back.
Mm-mm.
Oh my God. I'm literally in the same exact space that I've been in all day.
Do you want to hop on and off?
No, because then we're gonna lose the whole live. I can't do that.
You're right.
We have like 10 minutes left, so I'd rather. Hold on. Let me just try to see if I could find a more reasonable space. How are we doing now? How about now?
It's
like
still
that T-Mobile commercial where it's like, can you hear me now?
Yeah, the Can You Hear Me Now commercials.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, no, it's still, you still have it.
It's still paused for real?
Yeah, it's still paused.
Oh my God, I'm so upset. No.
Hold
on, let me.
The people want to see your face, girl.
Try it again. Hello.
This is, you know, when you spit too much truth, Instagram acts up. When you're spitting way too much truth, Instagram always
That is the facts of life.
Okay.
That is so real. I've also noticed like engagement goes down, like for some reason.
Yep.
Even if people are definitely wanting the vibes. Okay, can you see me now?
No.
Coño. All right. Well, hold up. I'm gonna save this live and I'm gonna post it, but then I'm gonna restart again. So I'm gonna post this and then we'll keep going and then I'll post that again.